I'm Nick.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the PUDs Podcast. Alrighty, so we're not in Portugal, unfortunately. I'll save the details for that for our next full episode, but considering we're here at home and again, not in Portugal, I thought it'd be a good night for me and Ash maybe to hop on the podcast and do something a little bit topical. And in light of recently having Mike Shrokey on and talking to another couple folks who recently finished their Vermont 4,000 footers, I thought it'd kind of be cool to touch upon and do a little SPUDs on our experience hiking the Vermont 4,000 footers, which is probably pretty pertinent to many people on this podcast. Since I'm assuming many of you listeners out there are working on hiking lists, maybe the New England 67, in addition to the 48 and even some bigger lists like the Northeast 111. So without further ado, I'm here with Ash tonight.
Hi.
She's back, and we did our Vermont 4,000 footers together. We'll hop right on into it. So there's 5 4,000 footers in Vermont. All of them are developed, meaning they have a ski resort or some sort of building on them, except Camel's Hump. Many people end up approaching the Vermont 4Ks when they're working on their New England 67, since it is part of that AMC list, the AMC New England 67 4,000 footers. So Vermont kind of has the least of all of them. I think it probably gets thought about the least when people are thinking about 4,000 foot peaks. It's probably an afterthought if you spend most of your time in New Hampshire, or maybe not. I'm not sure, but that's sort of why we found ourselves kind of seeking out these peaks and looking to hike them. In addition to, they're just really beautiful in themselves. Besides the fact that they're sort of on a hiking list. You have anything to chime in with, Asher? Hopefully I did my math correctly.
I think as we start talking about each peak, I'll definitely have different things to add. I mean, one thing that sticks out to me about the Vermont peaks that's different than the New Hampshire peaks is mud. I remember there being like quite a bit of mud on.
Vermud.
Yeah, it kind of gets the nickname Vermud for that reason. I definitely remember there being quite a bit of mud on a lot of the hikes. And if I'm not mistaken too, we did most of these hikes in the summer, like summer or fall, right? We never did any of these in the winter.
Technically, yeah, I'm trying to think just time span on Mansfield. But yeah, we did them all in the summer or the fall. So we didn't do any in the spring or the winter. And our journey kind of began during the height of COVID, actually. So I kind of just actually wrote down some notes and went through earlier today so that we're kind of on track and I just have something to go by. But yeah, it started in November 2020. We actually went away to, I don't think it was in Stowe, Vermont, but we were in some town just outside Stowe, whose name is escaping me. I probably should have looked on a map, but that's all good. But I think our friends and we were kind of getting stir crazy. So I believe my friend Megan found a house out in Vermont with a couple of us, including friends of the podcast, Mike and Lorrie. I don't think I had hiked with Lorrie by that point yet.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think I had either.
Yeah. So this was mainly me, Mike, and Ash sort of mission. But when we were up there, I think we were going to be up there for just basically a long weekend. But we were definitely looking to check out some Vermont 4,000 footers. We all actually completed our 48 in 2019, Mike a few months earlier, like maybe the spring of 2019, early summer, and we finished our 4,000 footers in New Hampshire, I think around like the fall of 2019, like September 2019 timeframe. So kind of hot off the heels of the original 48. And the closest 4,000 footer in Vermont to where we were staying happened to be Mount Mansfield, which is the tallest peak in Vermont. It's at 4,393 feet. And a little background on sort of the different peaks, because a lot of people, if you search for Mount Mansfield online, you're going to see the chin. And the whole deal is Mount Mansfield, if you look at it from the east, it actually looks like the profile of a face if it was sort of someone lying on their back. And you have a couple different sub-peaks, including the Adam's apple, the forehead, and the nose. And the chin is actually the high point in Vermont and on Mount Mansfield itself. So that's sort of your final peak destination there. Like I said, tallest point in Vermont. It's a beautiful ridgeline hike, which we kind of didn't expect. I know at the time
we were above. I remember being above tree line for quite a bit.
Yeah,
we broke out pretty early from what I remember, right?
Yeah, you break out pretty quickly. I'm glad you brought that up, as someone's texting me in the background, which you probably can hear, but oh well, texting exists, we're in reality. Hi Mom, who's texting me. But yeah, Mount Mansfield is actually above tree line for 2.3 miles. It's the biggest area of alpine zone in Vermont. Abraham also has alpine zone, as does Camel's Hump. Camel's Hump probably has a bit more. It's kind of in the middle. Mount Mansfield has a pretty big area of exposed alpine zone, like Ash mentioned. And again, you can't really find as much information about the Vermont 4,000 footers. I think it's getting better out there. And granted, this wasn't that long ago, but it's long enough ago where I think since COVID, the popularity of probably hiking a lot of these peaks has sort of taken off by some degree. But we couldn't find a lot, so we kind of just knew we were looking, like basically got a trail map. We knew what trails we were looking to take to get up there. And we kind of just set out. And I think I mentioned, but yeah, this was in November. So it was kind of in that in-between time of year where I think the weather was fairly warm when we were up there, but like they had already gotten snow and stuff up there.
Yeah, I definitely remember there being like random patches of snow throughout the hike. Well, more so as we got higher up.
Yeah, for sure. So we had our spikes. I can't remember, honestly. I think we might have used our spikes for part of it, but I know it was super wet. Like, I don't know. I'll have to go back and ask Mike about that one.
I do remember.
I'm not positive. I know we had spikes on us.
We were coming off
and we were coming through snow and slush.
We were also coming off of a night of like partying, basically. Because
we were admittedly at quite a few. I don't think we were partying late at night, but we went to like just cideries, like drinking hard cider all day, and we were all dehydrated.
This was basically like the day after our first night. Yeah. So like we had driven up and
everybody was looking to tie one on, so to speak.
Yeah, we were ready to go.
not a fantastic decision, but alas, there we were, and we were excited. So the route that we chose, and we actually kind of deviated a little bit from this, which I'll explain, but and this is probably the most common sort of loop to make out of it, but we actually chose to take the long trail from Vermont 108, which is basically from the eastern side of the mountain. It's in the highway that goes through Smuggler's Notch, and that route, you can go up and back, out and back from the long trail if you choose to. We saw a variation where you take the Hazelton Trail down and you kind of make a loop back to the highway. This would have been 6.5 miles and 2,800 feet of gain. And Stowe Ski Resort is actually the big resort that's out on Mount Mansfield. So if you're familiar with Stowe and stuff, that literally is Mount Mansfield. And it's funny because I've talked to a lot of people since, and friends I know who ski and don't realize that that's like the high point in Vermont. Yeah, just an interesting little tidbit there. So we set out early in the morning, as Ash mentioned. We were definitely all hungover, needless to say.
For sure. And
poor decisions. I think a lot of it was we just didn't realize we're like, oh yeah, we probably should hydrate more. And I think though we all like proverbially like sweated out within like a mile or so, because this trail, while not particularly, like, I feel like if you look at the numbers, it doesn't look too bad, but it's very steep going up.
It was pretty, like, steady, like, from the jump, from what I remember.
Yeah, I
like,
think
it didn't really waste much
flat
time.
For maybe half a mile, and then you're pretty much heading up the side of Smuggler's Notch to Mount Mansfield. And the other thing, in addition to the conditions being sort of wet and icy and snowy, that I feel like a lot of people, and honestly, I sort of had forgotten about it too until I think one of our listeners had commented on Instagram posts, and she was mentioning, and I know Troki was mentioning too, but the upper part of going up the chin by the long trail to Mount Mansfield, and this is heading southbound essentially on the long trail, but it's very steep and ledgy, and there's a couple fairly exposed sections of ledge where I fully remember we got to the top, to the chin, and none of us were super thrilled about going back down the long trail because it was icy in sections and pretty wet. And we probably weren't at like 100%, to be completely honest. So we were kind of debating that. But yeah, just a really steep climb on the long trail. And we got up to the top
pretty early, right? Wasn't it only like 10:30?
Yeah, we made good time. I think it was
definitely before
10:15, 10:30. And we probably only started at like 7:30, 8 o'clock. So it's not a particularly long hike. I forget exactly what the mileage is to just the chin by itself. It might be like 2.8 miles or something like that. But it's nothing too crazy. And yeah, I remember the most just being blown away by the fact that it was like open ridgeline. It's almost akin to like, it's not a Franconia Ridge, but it is similar to like Bondcliff or something. Like it's a giant area of alpine zone and ridgeline up there, and it kind of drops off steeply on either side. And
it was super clear that day too.
Yeah.
I remember it was a really nice day, like weather-wise. Like I don't think there was any clouds in the sky.
No,
sunny.
it was nice. I think it was like probably like, I know I had leggings on under shorts, so it was probably in like the 40s, 50s. At the summit, it might have been more like 40s. Yeah. And it's funny looking back now, I realize like we didn't have any idea really what we were looking at as much as far as like, cause you're sandwiched in between, like a lot of the Vermont peaks, you're sandwiched in between like Lake Champlain. You got the Adirondacks to the far west that you can see. And then to your east, you have the Whites. So you're kind of in this middle perspective. Then to your south, so Mount Mansfield, I didn't mention, is the furthest north of all the Vermont 4,000 footers. From north to south, you've got pretty much Mount Mansfield and then Camel's Hump. And then you've got Ellen, Abraham, and then Killington. So Killington's at the southern kind of tail of the Vermont 4,000 footers. So you're sandwiched up there, kind of the northern third of Vermont. It's beautiful where it is. It was after foliage when we did it in November, but it was still really pretty, despite being pretty much gray and muddy in certain places. Spent a good chunk of time up there. We hung out and we began to make our way down. Now, to this day, me and Mike have looked and we don't know exactly how we missed the Hazelton Trail coming down. I know we had to come down by like where the nose is, sort of, and there's like a visitor center and stuff we went by, and we like were looking on our maps, and I think Mike probably had all trails at least at that point, and like we just missed the entrance to it, and we started actually just going down the ski trails, which didn't last super long. Well, I should say we did make our way successfully down, but the one that we chose, so it had been cold enough that they were already blowing snow on Stowe at that point. So we actually took off down a ski trail, and I remember we were post-holing in like knee-thigh deep snow.
Yeah, it was very deep
which
snow.
At first was like oh, funny, haha, like we're going down in the snow. And then it quickly, as many people have experienced, it quickly gets exhausting when you're post-holing like that. So we had to backtrack, finally found our way around sort of the bowl of the ski area and started making our way down ski slopes, which it wasn't the worst way down. It was just steep, and I'd say just really rough on your knees, because like ski slopes are not walking slopes. Like they're a lot steeper grade going down. We probably went down like even like green like circles or whatever. It's not was like a blue square or anything, but it was still very steep going back down to the resort.
Yeah, and you would think too, going down like the ski slopes would be like the quicker way down, but I mean it's really not. It took us a good amount of time to get down.
No, I think it just beats you up. And it's funny, Trokey touched upon this too, and I remember, but there's something screwy, and I didn't look on a map beforehand, I'll be honest, at least as far as this area, but I remember it took us a little bit to find the long trail north again to where we actually needed to go to get back to our car. Like there's something weird. Well, I don't know if the southbound trail and the northbound trail separate at one point over there, or if it got rerouted, or what the deal is. And again, this is us not knowing the area at all. Like I haven't been to Stowe a bunch since we've been to Vermont a few times since, obviously. And like I kind of am a little bit better orientated with where stuff is. So maybe it was just us back then. Maybe it was just that fact that we were tired and we were out hiking in the morning and stuff after a night of
I also don't
cideries.
think we realized how big that ski resort is.
No,
it's
Stowe
a very
is
large
enormous.
It's a
huge.
very large ski resort. So I don't think we took that into account either. Like
yeah, it looks like
I think
I'm right
we
here.
ended on one side and we had to go like walk back to the side that we started on.
So like I was saying, like I know our planned route was 6.5 miles and 2,800 feet, but we probably did more mileage than that. I don't know by how much more we did. It's not like it took us all day. Like I think we got down by like 2:30 or 3 o'clock or something.
We got back by like the afternoon.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that was Mount Mansfield, tallest peak in Vermont, and that was super cool. So it would be a little bit before we'd actually sort of continue banging out Vermont 4,000 footers. The next trip that we'd ended up going to Vermont would be July of 2021. And we didn't stay anywhere super close. And we stayed in Vermont, but it wasn't somewhere super close to any of the 4,000 footers. Like I think Killington was like maybe an hour and a half away, and Camel's Hump was like 2 hours from where we were staying. I think we stayed in Londonderry, Vermont, which is one of the areas that got hit really bad by the flooding. And actually that year while we were up there, probably worth mentioning too, we had a really bad thunderstorm up there and lost power for the last 2 days we were there, which was kind of cool. Well, they had a generator, but we had no cell service or like anything. And one of the roads to actually a part of 100 that gets you to Londonderry actually washed out.
Oh yeah,
straight up, and we had to go around that on the way home, which unfortunately seems like it's just becoming a regular thing in Vermont, is they just get crazy flooding every summer. In any event, on the way up, we were joined by friends of the podcast, Mike and Lorrie, and we were going to kick off our vacation week by doing Killington and Pico Peak on the Saturday morning we were driving up. And I don't know if it's Pico or Pico.
We kept going back and forth with like what it was called.
Yeah. So Killington is 4,235 feet, second tallest, I believe, in Vermont, and home to the Killington Ski Resort, which is probably pretty renowned and pretty popular from what I've gathered and heard. Pico Peak or Pico Peak, I believe, had its own resort on it. Not sure if it's affiliated with Killington or if it's like a sub sort of mid or still canon kind of deal or what the deal is. But one notable thing about Pico, I'm just going to say Pico from here on out because it's going to get annoying if I keep saying Pico. Yeah. Pico.
That's fine. I honestly don't know how to say it.
But Pico Peak is a New England 100 highest peak, so that's a pretty popular list if you're looking to check those both out. Or I should say, if you're looking to check out Killington, you probably want to check both of them out and just knock out Pico because it wasn't too much more. We actually chose this route because we just wanted to make it more of a hike than just doing Killington by itself, and I had read good things about this. The route that we chose to take is the Shelburne Trail, which is actually an old part of the Long Trail. The Long Trail since been reconstructed on that and takes another trail down, or another path down, I suppose. They're both trails. But the Shelburne Trail to Pico Camp to the Pico Spur, and from there you hit the Long Trail, or I should say that's where you hit the summit of Pico, and then from there you take the Long Trail to Cooper Lodge, and then you go up and down the Killington Spur to Killington, and we went down the Buckland Trail, and this actually made a nice car spot traverse, and the car spots weren't really that far apart where we had to go. Like, it was probably like a 10-minute ride, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
I forgot
it's like
it Vermont
was I forgot it was a car spot that we did.
Yeah. Y'all, your listeners can check it out on the map. I tried to write down details on some of these, but it looks like I didn't write down what route this was. So yeah, we basically car spotted our car at where the Shelburne Trail begins. Up in like, I forget, that road's on like a giant hill. I remember that. I think it's like Route 4 or something, but it's on a massive hill that goes.
Vermont roads are just
Vermont
crazy.
Roads are interesting. Yeah, and then we rode with Mike and Lorrie and left our car at or I should say we picked them up at Buckland Trailhead at the bottom, and then we drove back around our car, and then we started our hike. But this was a pretty cool hike. I remember there was really good views from Pico Peak and kind of the ski slopes. One thing that that sticks out in my memory quite a bit is there was a sign specifically saying that Pico Peak has a bunch of porcupines on it, and to be careful if you had a dog, because I imagine that could end poorly.
That's right.
But it was like Pico has porcupines or something like that.
Yeah. Didn't we also cross people who were doing the Long Trail?
We did.
When we were on Pico?
Yeah, we crossed a few people again, because this was July. We crossed quite a few folks doing the Long Trail. I do remember that. Not a ton, but like a group of like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
I'd say. Yeah, and I forget what the Long Trail and the Appalachian Trail are combined at that point. I believe they are, because that's the southern end. I don't think it separates till a little bit before Camel's Hump. Anything else you had sort of notable about that? I know it was a fun car spot traverse. Killington, I remember, was kind of a bummer because I think there was literally someone getting married up there. Like, there was it seemed like hundreds of people.
Yeah, so I was going to say,
one thing, just kind of a bummer.
One thing about Killington that is, reminiscent of like a Mount Washington type of hike is you can take a chairlift to the top. So when we did get to the top, there were a number of people who were up there that hadn't hiked. And yes, there was definitely a wedding going on.
Yeah, there was like wedding photos getting shot.
Yeah, I remember
it was an
that.
Interesting vibe when you're like stinky
and I
hikers
remember
coming
too,
up with people dressed up.
You, Mike, and I had experienced a hike before, obviously, doing Washington, and we'd both Washington, Cannon. We had done hikes before where when you get to the top, you see people who are dressed in just like regular clothes, that just kind of strolled sometimes up there. And that was, I remember Lori's first experience with that. And she was like, not thrilled. And I mean,
she seemed not to be a fan.
Yeah. And we were like, yep, see, So, because it's something obviously we had experienced before. But yeah, no, I definitely remember that from the top of, and I don't think we spent too much time there at that point at the top. No. I feel like we almost spent more time on the top of Pico than we did on the top of Killington.
Yeah,
but I could be wrong.
I remember Pico had a bunch of like pretty butterflies and stuff. And I don't really remember, none of the hike was really that difficult except maybe the last scramble up Killington goes up pretty good.
Yeah, that was
to like
a pretty
the very
good one.
Summit of Killington. But other than that, like nothing was that crazy. The Buckland Trail, I remember, was very mellow to come down.
I remember there being a lot of mud on that one too.
Yeah, it was super muddy. And well,
considering all the rain and stuff they had recently had.
Yeah, and this route, I don't think I dropped that already, but maybe I'll drop it again in case I can edit it out. But it's, if you do that car spot traverse, which I highly recommend, it's 9.6 miles and 2,650 feet. So it's, again, like Choki kind of was chatting about, like you can hike in Vermont and not feel like, I think he said, give a pound of flesh every time you get from one peak to another. Like a lot of these hikes in Vermont, you can make them more difficult or longer if you want to, but if you're just trying to get the shortest route to a lot of these peaks, you're not going to be giving up the mileage and elevation gain that you're going to like find in, I'd say, most of the 4,000 footers and the whites, or a good chunk of them. However, I'm not saying that there's not any steep portions or potentially sketchy portions. Mount Mansfield for sure. If it was wet or icy, there was one section that we were on where like you'd probably need crampons and ice axe to get around it if you were in the winter. And I don't know, I'm assuming they're probably pretty popular in the winter for people too.
Yeah, but, I'm sure. Again, I'm sure there's people who even hike up it and then like ski down. I'm sure that's a big thing. Yeah.
So that was our second Vermont 4,000 footer back in July of 21. So later that week in July of 21, I had been chatting with my cousin Sara-Beth and her husband Jay. They're hikers and super avid expert skiers. And we hadn't hung out in a long time, so it was really cool that, I forget whether she reached out or I reached out, but we had been chatting, and since she likes hiking, I was kind of like, hey, we're going to be up in Vermont this week. Would you want to like come stay for a few nights and hang out and hike? And it actually was her birthday that week, which I thought was cool that she chose to come up there and like hang out and stuff. And yeah, they drove up and we met at Camel's Hump on the Thursday of that week. I don't know why I remember it was the Thursday, but
oh yeah, I don't remember what day of the week it was. Yeah. I remember it was more towards the end of the week, but yeah.
And speaking of which, I mean, not to call you out, but I remember you and Sarah and Mel were having fun the night before, and I was like, you should go to bed. And it was like, I went to bed. I went to bed at like 8:30.
Yeah, I definitely had a little.
We're gonna get up at like 5:30.
I had a little too much fun the night before,
6 o'clock.
But I made it through. Yeah. Fortunately, we had like a decent car ride there, so it gave me time to like hydrate, eat, like funny. Wake up a little bit.
Decisions that we don't make anymore.
Yeah, well, this was pre-child, so
yes, this is also true. So it's a little bit easier to do that. But yeah, I vividly remember being like, I'm going to go to bed. And you're like, you should stay up longer. And I'm like, nah, I'm going to go in bed and have a snack. And like, I think I literally watched Deadliest Catch and like went to sleep. And then you came up at some point. And then the alarm went off the next morning and you were like, oh man, I didn't pack my backpack. So it was fine. Yeah. I pulled it together. You did. You pulled it together. We had like a 2-hour ride to get to Camel's Hump.
Yeah. So plenty of time for me to wake up and get ready.
You got your faculties back. So some facts about Camel's Hump. Camel's Hump sits at 4,083 feet. Yeah, 4,083 feet. It's the only undeveloped Vermont 4,000 footer peak, as I mentioned before. So you don't have to worry about anything up there as far as like ski resorts or people showing up that didn't actually hike there, because you have to hike up Camel's Hump to get there. The route that we chose to do Camel's Hump from was the Monroe Trail to the Dean Trail. From there you hit the Long Trail and go north to the summit, and then we return via the Monroe Trail, and this makes for a loop of about 8 miles and 2,600 feet. And this is from the eastern side of Camel's Hump. There's a couple different directions you can approach it. I have since, in July of 23, also did the Burrows Trail from the western side of Camel's Hump. That's about 4.8 miles and 2,300 feet. And that also had a killer section of like a mile where it goes up like 1,500 feet. But then you're like as soon as I popped out from that and it leveled out for a bit and you head up to the summit, like it was very easy to get there. And it was also incredibly easy to get down. I think it only took me maybe like an hour or so to get down that day, just having fun. So we met up at the trailhead and sort of headed up the Monroe Trail. I don't remember a ton. It's funny just because this is a while back, but again, like I don't remember anything super notable. I do remember that on the way there, and I probably should have mentioned this in the factoid section, but as one might guess and gather, from the name of the peak, it looks like a giant granite hump when you're driving towards it. You can see it pretty well from quite a few areas of Vermont. It's very prominent. The entire peak is alpine zone that rises a couple hundred feet above sort of the vegetation line on Camel's Hump. So it looks like a giant Camel's Hump. But yeah, we made our way up. I don't remember much notable. I think it was kind of cool and
Wasn't
wet.
there one point where we were starting to get closer to the top where we had to kind of like second guess which way we were going?
Yes. I actually wrote this in my notes to talk about the cliffs fake out. And that
was really the only thing I remember, honestly.
But yeah, if you're heading up the long trail north to the summit of Camel's Hump instead of from the northern side of the summit, if you're heading from the southern side heading north, there's one part where it looks like you're going to have to just scale some like 100-foot cliffs like in front of you, because you can't really tell where the path goes. It does go further around the west and like we found it, but it is funny as you're approaching it, you're like, oh God, are we going to have to go up that? And there was a couple pretty good scrambly pitches going up that way on the long trail.
Yeah.
So again, not like super exposed or anything, but enough that they stick out in my memory. But I remember we like looked at each other like, oh crap, are we gonna have to go up that?
Yeah, I definitely remember that. And I think too, like sometimes, like, I mean, obviously this was our first experience hiking with Sara-Beth and Jay. So I feel like when you've never hiked with someone before, you don't always know like what their pace is going to be. Like, do they like to stop and like take breaks a lot? Like how, what type of hikers they are. But I feel like we gelled. We gelled really easily. Yep. We fit right in with each other. I feel like our paces were pretty much on point with each other. Yeah. We, similar hiking. So that was nice.
I'm glad you pointed that out because you don't always know how that's gonna work out. And they hike and have done Washington and done a bunch too. So I wasn't particularly worried. But
no, I wasn't worried. But I was saying I feel like that was kind of the first time in a while where we had hiked with people that we hadn't hiked with before. Like I feel like we tended up until that point, we tended to hike with like each other or kind of the same group of people.
Yeah, it was me, you, Mike, kind of for most of that.
So that was cool.
Yeah, that was neat. I do remember too, we wanted to start pretty early in the morning because the weather was supposed to sort of turn sideways. And like, as we were up there, like you could see clouds moving in from the west. Like I remember you couldn't really see Champlain that well. To the east, it was kind of getting grayer.
It was definitely a cloudy day. I don't remember it being like sunny or anything.
Yeah, it wasn't supposed to. Well, I think that was the storm that was actually approaching that. Like, there was like that night later out that I think we like lost power in Vermont. Or I should say we were in Vermont the whole time. Where the house we were staying at like lost power. I think it was that night or early Friday morning because of a thunderstorm. So I think that was sort of the first round of showers and storms that were coming in. We got up there, hung out for quite a while, and eventually I remember kind of looking at Sara-Beth and stuff, being like, "Yeah, we probably should get going because like the weather looks like it's going to turn to shit."
We never caught any rain though, I don't think.
No,
right?
We made it back to the cars. I think it started raining on the way home a little bit, but we actually didn't get any rain or anything. And I remember coming down sort of that if you're coming north off the summit of Camel's Hump, like it's ledgy and stuff, and you're kind of along a little bit of a cliff edge for part of it, but like it's not anything crazy. Like you don't want to go down any trail when it's wet, but there wasn't anything ridiculous like if you were coming down and it was rainy. But again, we didn't necessarily know that, and we didn't want to come down in the rain and wet for the first time going down here. So yeah, at Camel's Hump, only one out of all these that I've gone back to do twice. I think it has amazing. I since got back, and the day that I did, it had incredible views. It had fantastic visibility. Like I could see the whites. I couldn't see Washington, but I could see like Moose Lock and a couple of the other whites. And I could see a bunch of the Adirondacks and Lake Champlain and stuff. Like could see Marcy and everything. And you have a great view of South to Ellen and Abraham. And then to the north, you have Mount Mansfield. So it's a pretty sick view. And I really enjoyed that summit. It's got really open alpine zone, pretty flat on the top. And it's got like all those nice little stringed off areas. So they try to prevent you from trampling on the fragile alpine vegetation.
That, yeah.
Anything else for Camel's Hump?
I don't think so.
Okay. You look like you were going to say something else.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. Nothing really stand out other than what I already said.
So Camel's Hump was our number 3 peak. And then this takes us up to last summer. Actually, we literally did this week last summer because it's coming up in my memories. But we did Ellen and Abraham for our number 4 and number 5 peaks to round out the Vermont 4,000 footers. So Ellen and Abraham are 4,083 feet and 4,006 feet respectively. They make up the mountains that many people are probably familiar with, where the ski resorts of Sugarbush and Mad River Glen reside. Sugarbush is like enormous. It seemed like I didn't realize how big that was either. Mad River Glen's a little bit smaller ski resort, or a lot smaller from the looks of it. I know it's got a reputation of being more like a backcountry, like old school ski resort. Like their motto at Mad River Glen is like ski it if you can, which I think is kind of cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw that on like a bumper sticker one time. And on their website. But yeah, so to bag these 2 peaks, you can do either of them separately. You can do I'm saying there's nothing stopping you from doing them separately. I think for how close they are together, and from what I've read, it seems like most people try to do both of them at once. They're not terribly far apart from one another. I had read about this idea, which it was not like a totally crazy idea. It's definitely a common thing that people do, but I'd read about doing a car spot traverse, and this whole section of Ellen and Abraham, again on the long trail, all the Vermont 4,000 foot peaks are all on the long trail or like right off of it. So this section of the long trail where the resorts of like Sugarbush and Mad River Glen are, where Ellen and Abraham are, and it's sandwiched between 2 gaps. So to the north, you have Appalachia Gap, and to the south, you have Lincoln Gap, which is actually like the highest road gap in Vermont, I believe. And we were fortunate enough that we were up there with family. So we decided that we'd do this section of the long trail that people refer to as the Monroe Skyline from north to south. So we dropped our car off at Lincoln Gap. My aunt and my uncle gave us a ride up north to Appalachia Gap, and we hiked north to south doing the entirety of the Monroe Skyline. You hit a bunch of peaks along the way. Obviously, Ellen and Abraham are sort of the notable ones. They're the 4,000 footers that we were looking to bag. But Ellen in itself doesn't have any views at the summit, really.
I forgot some about
views
that.
from a chairlift. Abraham was for another reason, interestingly, that day. And
that's what we ended on, right?
Yeah, we ended on Abraham.
Okay.
So
I remember having a view at the
Ellen's
end.
a little further to the north, Abraham's to the south. But another thing that many people can sympathize with from last summer is the wildfire haze that just didn't seem to go away. So we started during the day and it wasn't super hazy, and it moved in really hard to the point that we couldn't see like much at all from Abraham. But you've got good views from a bunch of peaks along that entire area. Like, it's funny because I've read online where people were like, they make it sound like, frankly, it had like crap views and there wasn't much there besides like Abraham, but there was a lot of pokes out of views even with haze.
There were,
looking down
there
to
were
the
a lot
valley.
of little areas. And I mean, what's cool at like, I feel like stands out with the Vermont peaks is because most of them are on ski resorts. There's inevitably
Open.
areas where
Yeah.
you can walk out
Yeah,
where
the
like
ski trails.
the chairlifts are and the ski trails are, and kind of like look out, where you don't really get that with other hikes that aren't on
Yeah.
ski resorts.
Yeah, so this whole route is 11.6 miles on 2,500 feet. I call shenanigans on the 2,500 feet because
I
I
was
get a
gonna
lot more
say.
than that. I think I ended up with like 32 something.
It was definitely the most elevation gain, at least it felt like for me, that we had done yet
Yeah.
in Vermont.
I'd agree. I mean, granted, so just to take a step back, but 11.6 miles, 2,500 feet of gain, allegedly. I think it's a little bit more gain than that. It's not terribly difficult. Like, I'd say your biggest gains of the day are getting up onto that ridgeline itself. And we actually chose to do it north to south because I had read about a section, and we experienced this, where there's a couple sections of like iron rungs, kind of on ledge and stuff when you're actually trying to get up to the ridgeline heading north to south. So I figured we'd probably want to hit that on fresh legs. And also, again, with how wet it was last year in Vermont, like the trails were still soaked, even though it had been dry for a
Yeah.
few days. With
We
a lot
were
of
pretty,
mud.
we were pretty muddy at the end of
A
that
lot of
hike.
mud, plenty of water at least. We had plenty of water to filter, like literally everywhere. But there was a couple sections we walked through. Like, I remember going up to like where Lincoln Peak was, where it was just like knee deep water, like in the trail. And it was just
Yeah.
like, okay, we're just kind of going through here. Along that whole ridgeline, you'll cross over a couple other peaks. I'm not sure if any of these count for any sort of lists. So you have to look that up. But you pass over General Stark Peak, Lincoln Peak, Nancy Hanks Peak, and Little Abe, which is right near Abraham, which
Little
I think
Abe.
Little Abe, which I thought was just a really cool name for a peak. Lincoln Peak has this really cool platform, and I think we got some of the nicest pictures all day of that. There was wildflowers sort of blooming on the ski slopes, and it was really pretty.
Yeah,
That's kind of like right before you start heading towards Abraham, and basically the top of Sugarbush Ski Resort. But super cool. We were a little bummed out that we had really bad wildfire haze as the day went on. It was kind of annoying too because it was like it would have been like a blue sky sunny day, but the haze moved in so bad, like you couldn't even see Champlain to our west or like anything. You could see east a little bit further, but definitely not outstanding views. It wasn't terribly hot or anything, which was nice.
No, I remember it being very comfortable.
Other than the air quality just being probably garbage.
Yeah.
Because we were all hiking with wildfire smoke. So yeah, there's a couple different routes. I'm not going to outline all the different routes you can take to Ellen and Abraham. This one I recommend just because I think traverses are always really cool, and it's just
Especially if you have the ability to do a car spot.
Yeah, for sure. Starting from one of the gaps saves you about 1,000 feet of gain from any of the other alternative routes to get up to that ridgeline. So that probably really solidifies these as having the most elevation gain, I would think, out of most of the Vermont 4,000 footers. And anything you kind of had notable about that hike?
I don't think so. I definitely remember it being challenging, at least for me personally. It was definitely the longest hike I had done since having Rylan.
Oh yeah, for sure. By
So
far.
it was quite a day for me,
You did
but
really well.
I mean, I feel like the pacing of the hike was good because I feel like we would go up and then we'd go down a little bit and then we'd go back up. Like it wasn't like it was like a steady.
Yeah,
like-
I can't say, like, other than, like, going up to Abraham was a good climb, but I feel like there were just these steady 100 up, 100 down kind of climbs, like, the entire length of the ridgeline.
Yeah, it was very up and down. And I think just the mileage for me was, I mean, I hadn't done that much mileage in, I don't know, a year and a half probably.
Yeah.
So I definitely remember that aspect, but it was cool. I think it was a good hike. Well, it was good to end on those two, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought it was a good way to end. I feel like if you're going to do them in a certain sequence, I don't know, I feel like the sequence we did makes sense. Like we started off with like the highest peak in Vermont, or I mean, I guess you could technically end with the highest peak in Vermont if you wanted to, but I think the sequence that we did them in made sense, especially since we were coming off of the 48. So it's not like this was our introduction to hiking. No. So I think starting with the higher peak, was fine. Ending with a traverse was good.
Agreed. Yeah, and I did want to note, too, if you're looking for a good family hike with a young kid, go into Sunset Ledge, which is actually south on the long trail from Lincoln Gap. We went out and did that later in the week with Rylan, and it was a pretty good climb up for how short it was, especially with like a 15-year-old kid on your back. A 15-pound kid on your back. I don't know whatever she weighed at the time, but it has a beautiful ledge that sort of faces west, hence Sunset Ledge, that we actually got better views than we got from Abraham probably.
I know, yeah. Before.
And it was kind of cool. You could see Abraham sort of poking around the corner. So that was really fun and just definitely something to check out if you're looking for a nice little family hike in the area. And I think just driving up to Lincoln Gap is kind of a cool thing in itself because it's
that was cool. That was a cool road.
Yeah. So any final thoughts about sort of what it was like hiking? Granted, Vermont only has 5 peaks instead of like 48, or even Maine with its 15. I'm trying to think again if I did that correctly with the 67, because you're right, 5 in Vermont, and 48 would be 53, and then 5th. No, I did it wrong. It's 14 in Maine, right?
Yeah. I had to think for a second. I'm like,
I did it wrong.
I can't do math right now. That's okay. You were close.
Yeah, I'm like, gotta write it down. 5, 48, 53, 14. There we go. That's your numbers. 14 4,000 footers on Maine, 5 in Vermont, 48 in New Hampshire to make up the New England 67.
I don't know. I think one thing that's cool about the Vermont hikes is, again, the fact that 80% of them are on a ski resort of some kind. So I think just
you're going to have view areas. Essentially.
Yeah, I feel like you get natural view areas. I feel like it can make for some cool pictures too. Like a lot of the times too, the chairlifts they're just like paused, so you can even like sit on one of the chairs and we did that for a little bit. We did that on General Stark Peak. When we were hanging out at General Stark Peak in like Stark's Nest. Yeah. Which is like at the top of Mad River Glen, I think. But which was kind of cool. And I think too, because they're at ski resorts too, like when you're starting or ending the hike, sometimes the ski lodges are still open, even though it's, if you were to do it off season, which is nice because there's bathrooms and things like that. So I don't know. There's like, I feel like that makes the Vermont hikes like a little bit more unique from the New Hampshire ones, just because most of them are on ski resorts. So like you said, you get those natural views. You get areas that you can hang out that you wouldn't normally on like a New Hampshire hike. Mansfield too, like I wanted to, I guess, clarify, because you are skiing. It was a ski resort on Stowe on Mount Mansfield, but like where the top of the chin is like not near where you're getting off chairlifts. Like you're probably not going to see someone hopping up there in ski boots. No. Like but I mean, when you're coming down,
like it's literally the top of the resort. Ellen and Abraham, like it seemed like the Abraham is sort of on the backside of where Sugarbush is, but like you're not going to see people probably hiking from the ski resort there. Where Ellen is, you absolutely like the best view from Ellen is at a chairlift up there. So it's like you're maybe like you could easily walk there. It's like 0.1 mile away. It's probably even shorter than that to walk to the true summit of Ellen. But again, there's no views on there, so probably not a lot of people actually bother to do that. Yeah. And Camel's Hump, the one that doesn't have any ski resort development on it, has perfect 360-degree views. So you're pretty much good either way. Yeah, I mean, I think you get like a little bit of everything with the Vermont hikes. You get some hikes that are more wooded. You get some hikes that have 360 views. Yep. You could do a traverse. So I feel like even though there's only 5 of them, you do get a good taste of kind of everything if you want to compare it to New Hampshire, the New Hampshire 4,000 footers. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I'd be curious too if you're listening out there and you're an avid Vermont hiker, like reach out to us with some other good Vermont hikes, because I honestly like I have like I think like the Green Mountain Guide or a couple guides, But
because I mean, Vermont's beautiful. We really enjoy
it's
visiting in Vermont and staying in Vermont. Like we
and
like
it is pricier than New Hampshire for a lot of places
but I mean,
for lodging.
I like how it's kind of like a mix of like farm and country.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It is really pretty. There's a lot of really good places to eat, breweries. So yeah, if there's any other hikes that are local to Vermont that are smaller, family friendly, yeah, we would definitely be interested.
Shoot us a text, let us know. We did check out a reservoir later that week when we were up in
that little trail around the reservoir.
That was nothing too crazy.
That was cool.
Yeah, I did just mention guides a little bit. So if you're looking for information about these peaks, your best bet's probably the Long Trail Guide. But again, like as Troki was mentioning a couple episodes ago, they don't go into real detail, like say the 4,000 footer guide that the AMC produces, or the Steve Smith, Micah Dickerman guide. You're not gonna like find that unless someone comes out with it. I'm gonna link this site too, because I don't think I've linked it in any episode notes yet, and I didn't really think of it because I guess it just hasn't come to mind. But there's an old website that was out, and I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, but it was by a guy named, or at least his last name was Elozzi, Elozzy, who I imagine was a super avid hiker. I'm not sure if he passed or if he didn't want to maintain the website. But at some point, somebody decided to put it in GitHub, and this is actually a pretty good resource with rough notes for all your New England 4,000 footers. I think it has the main ones in there, I forget, but at least New Hampshire and Vermont. And it goes into detail really pretty akin to some of the guides as far as elevation gain and routes and mileage that you're looking at. And I found this really handy for the Vermont peaks because I could not find a good consolidated resource with just like hey, like here's these 3 or 4 routes to this summit, and kind of let you break down and decide what you want to do. Like this was a fantastic resource for that. The guides do exist. And again, reach out if you know of a better resource than those 2 things that I found. There is a patch actually that came out. I'm not sure how recent this is. Someone brought this to my attention like literally, I think last fall, or because I saw a patch on their backpack and was like, oh, that's cool. But there is a little Vermont 5 patch.
I need to apply
if you just
for that
Google,
still.
Like, if you just Google like Vermont 5, like there's a site or organization or maybe both that actually will send patches. I believe they're just doing a 3-season patch and a winter patch right now for it, but it's super easy. You don't have to like write a letter or anything. Not that writing a letter to get your AMC patches is terribly difficult, but similar deal with writing down your dates, who you're with, and you just fill out the form online. And I believe they just asked you to write and type up sort of one memory that you had, like the Vermont 4,000 footers. That was cool. So I actually mentioned our hike with Sara-Beth up Camel's Hump when I did that.
Nice.
And within like a week or so, they sent me a bunch of patches and stickers and all that good stuff in the mail.
Yeah,
so if you're into the patches and stickers like we are,
that.
you can send it in and get a patch for those.
I think I stole one of your stickers to put on the Subaru, but I definitely need to get a patch.
It's okay. I forgive you. And I probably touched upon a little bit earlier, but again, just worth mentioning, and I've mentioned this many times before, but they are the Vermont 4,000 footers and New England 67 4,000 footers, a part of the overarching Northeast 111 list, aka the Northeast 115, because it's actually 115 peaks. You got 67. We got to do some math here again. So you have 67 4,000 footers in New England. You got 46 in the Adirondacks, which gets you to 113 4,000 footers. And then you've actually got 2 in the Catskills. So in the Catskill area of New York. So that's 115 peaks. But this is part of that whole overarching list, which I'm tentatively working on. So yeah, in the grand scheme of things. I'm not sure if they're part of New England 100. I would think a lot of these are probably on the New England 100 highest and things like that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so any final thoughts on our Vermont journey? They're super cool peaks. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we pretty much covered it all. Like you said earlier, I would definitely be curious to know some other like local hikes in Vermont that
for sure.
Maybe more family friendly hikes. Would definitely be curious to know about some of those. Maybe I know there's so many ski resorts in Vermont, so maybe like some of the other lesser known hikes that you can do at some of those ski resorts, that would be cool. Maybe some hikes that, because I definitely want to do this at some point. I would love to hike up and ski down at some point. So like maybe a good hike in Vermont that's good for somebody who's never done that before. That would be kind of cool to know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that'd be something cool to do. I'd love to go back and do one of them in the winter, like Camel's Hump or something like that. I just don't know what trailhead access and whatnot.
I remember that road was like deep in the woods.
The road to get to Camel's Hump from the eastern side, even in like a Subaru Outback, was like pretty interesting to get up. It's not like we were gonna like bottom out and get mud, but it was muddy and just like it was like, this is okay. Like it wasn't fantastic.
It was out there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's it. I definitely enjoyed doing the Vermont 5 Peaks. Like I said, I think they have a little bit of everything to offer in comparison to the 48 that we had done. So
yeah, I mean, you're not getting the spectacular amounts of alpine zone that say you find in the Northern Presidentials or somewhere else. But I really love the perspective of the Vermont peaks, especially now that we've done hiking the Adirondacks and like up in Maine and obviously our 48 and stuff. It's cool to like have that perspective because Vermont's sandwiched in the middle of all of them. So you can kind of on a really nice day from Camel's Hump or Mount Mansfield, you probably could see like maybe 100, 4,000, like probably not 100, but many 4,000 footers, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I'm sure we'll end up doing, some of them again. Yeah. I know you've already done one of them twice. You've already done Camel's Hump twice, but I would definitely do some of them again.
Yep. Agreed. Well, yeah, Josh got the night off tonight, so so we just want to hop on the mic and we'll be in touch. I'm sure we'll be back with the main episode pretty soon, and we'll delve into our travel issues that we had.
Yeah, I don't even want to talk about it right now. It's too fresh.
We're not ready. It's too fresh. So yeah, and we're planning a hike coming up this weekend, so I'm sure I'll be sharing some stuff on the Instagram page, and hopefully that goes well.
Yes.
So like, comment, subscribe, find us wherever you get your podcasts, and I don't want to be Josh. Maybe I'll try doing Josh.
No,
Josh
he'll get
angry.
He'll get mad. He'll get mad.
Yeah,
don't do it.
You're right. Let's not do it. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
PUDs Podcast was produced and recorded in Black Hat Studios by the Pud Boys. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving us a review and subscribing. Find us on social media, and we'll see you next time.